What's up? I'm Kiana.
I'm Calvin.
And this is Christ Culture, the podcast.
Yeah, we got a good one today.
Yeah. We're doing a Power of series. Today we're talking about the power of failure.
Yeah.
What are we talking about today?
We're talking about how to take that failure and flip your perspective to look at it differently.
Yeah. Saying how God moves us through our paths.
Yeah. And we're going to talk a little bit about goals as it relates to failures as well.
Ooh, juicy one. You guys are going to be so blessed by this.
Yep. Here we go. We just ate
What'd you eat? Chicken
strawberry
and rice.
yogurt. Strawberry
And rice.
yogurt. Work.
Yes. Okay, bye.
No, I had strawberry yogurt, honey granola on top, and then I had some turkey sausage and some wheat bread.
Breakfast.
Yep. What'd you have?
I had this
Something spicy.
spicy.
Yeah.
It was like straight out of the jalapeno seed.
Oh.
Like it had sprinkled red pepper flakes in it
Oh.
and like little microscopic spices as well.
Uh-oh.
I was sweating. What was that? It was the jerk chicken, non-chicken from Tropical Smoothie. Don't ever get that.
Oh, man.
That will not be a repeat.
Dang.
I got Bree's order because she likes spicy things, but I did not realize that. I ordered what she got because she's usually vegan.
Oh, okay.
That's why I was like, give me what Bree gets, but
Yeah.
I forgot that she's
A
a
little too
spicy
spicy
person.
for you?
Every taste bud was getting exploded,
Yeah.
so I could feel every single one.
So your mouth is barely working right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wasted half my smoothie because that was my savior, and
Trying to cool your taste buds off.
now I don't have any smoothie left.
Wow. So would you say that was a failure?
I don't believe in failure because one thing I'm not going to do is stop eating.
That's true.
But I learned that spicy is not for me.
So even though the meal didn't work out, you still learned something from that experience.
I mean, technically the meal worked out because I am fed.
Mm-hmm.
My experience did not work out.
Yeah.
I was miserable.
Yeah. But how come you're not going to let that experience deter you from eating a tropical
again?
smoothie again?
Because they have so many other things on their menu
Wow.
that I could choose from.
Yeah.
So I just know I'm not going to get that next time. I know I don't like that.
Yeah.
My body rejected the spice flavor, so it won't even allow me next time because we learned the first time.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to do that again. We don't put yourself through that
Yeah.
again.
I think a lot of people in that experience would just say, that was a failure. I can never eat a tropical smoothie again.
And they cancel the whole restaurant?
Yeah. They cancel the whole menu. They don't even look at the menu. They don't even want to go back and try it
They
again.
said, scarred. Cancel. You're canceled.
Yep. They said forget numbers 1 through 9 on the menu. Number 10 sucked, so I'm never coming back.
Ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's sad.
Yeah.
I love smoothies, so it won't happen for me.
Mm-hmm. So if they haven't figured it out already, maybe you can tell them what we're talking about today.
Well, we told them in the intro.
We did.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That other version of me that hasn't happened yet told them in the intro.
Oh, from the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, future me.
So we talking about failures?
Yeah.
Yeah. Failures are for real.
The power of a failure.
Whew. This is a touchy subject for some people because you're not going to like it.
Yeah. It's a touchy subject for me.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What's the most recent failure you've had?
You just gonna make me jump right into it, huh? When we start talking about the topic, it came up to my mind and I was like, I gotta talk about it.
Yeah, Holy Spirit, let it out.
That's what we do. We unpack our spiritual journeys here on the podcast. So
Okay.
I'm just gonna have to just get into it. You know what I mean? My name's Calvin.
We're waiting for you to get into it. Yeah.
For all the people who are just listening to this, my shirt says Calvin, so that's why I just said that. I was looking at my shirt, so I'm weird, but not that weird.
At least you didn't get tatted on yourself.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody has their name tatted on themselves, right?
I hope not.
Okay, just making sure. I was like,
Okay.
Kiana, across my neck.
So the power of failure. So I'm just going to talk about a recent, I won't call it a failure, but we'll get into that.
Mm-hmm.
June, I forget June. January of this year, I started a fast, right? So some of the things I was doing for the fast were, number one, waking up at 5 a.m. in the morning to go to the gym. I started running. Another thing I was doing for the fast was no social media for most of the day. I would only do it early in the morning, and that was only to post anything for Christ Culture or my business, Musty Entertainment. Shameless plug. And then I would get off. So I haven't scrolled. I haven't checked any messages since I started this. What else was I doing? I wasn't or haven't been spending any extra money outside of the essentials, so groceries.
Amazon.
That was one of the things I couldn't do. But like groceries, toiletries, gas, all the stuff that you have to spend money on. Outside of that, I haven't been spending money. I've actually been saving a lot of money, which is nice. So those were kind of the main things that I was doing on top of doing a devotional every morning, right along with the fast. So started that in early January. And for about the first 2 weeks, I was doing everything very strong. Was on track, was getting up every day, was doing it. And then I had a period where I got sick. And right after I got sick, I was sick for about 4 days. But after that, I never fully got back on track. So I've been doing the devotionals, but I've kind of been spotty with it. I haven't done them every day like I'm supposed to do. I no longer wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning. I usually still do my exercise at some point during the day, whether that's walking or running. I started to miss my walks, so I started to do my walks again. I already talked about the devotional. I've been really good with the money. I still haven't been spending any money. But yeah, I figured if we're going to talk about the good parts of our journeys, we got to talk about the stuff.
I'm waiting for the failure.
Where we fall short. And that's what I was going to say. I won't necessarily call it a failure. But what is a failure in the first place? A failure is just kind of an unmet expectation. So I had an expectation in the beginning of being able to do all these things continuously for 40 days without fail. And I have fallen short in a lot of those different areas of not being able to do it, or not doing it every day, I should say. And at first I started to feel like that it was a bit of a failure, I guess, just because the expectation that I had set had not been met. But the longer time has gone on and the more I kind of just prayed about it and kind of got myself back on track in some areas, it wasn't a failure and it's not a failure. And I've kind of started to move past that, and kind of studying and just thinking about this topic for today kind of helped with that in a lot of ways. So I thought that'd be a good place to start today, was for me to just be open about that and, talk about the fact that I fell short in some areas that I did not want to, but I'm still here. God still loves me. And I didn't quit the fast. I'm still doing it.
Yeah.
Even though I fell short some days, I'm still doing it. I did it today. So, yeah.
And it's okay.
Yeah. That's the big part right there, right?
It's okay.
Yeah. So, what was I was about to ask you a question. I promise you I was.
Oh.
And then I forgot. But what would you say to somebody like me who has fallen short in some areas? What would you say to them?
I'd say, one, it's okay to reframe your verbiage with yourself, because usually it's so easy for us to knock ourselves down and say like, oh, you failed. And then we get into this aspect of whatever trauma you have from a kid. Maybe some, like a coach you had was like, oh, you're a failure. Or like maybe it's a parent that said that. Like you go into that verbiage of how you're talking to yourself. So that's how you tend to beat up yourself. I don't know if that was your experience, but I had an experience where that is how I spoke to myself. But it's okay saying, oh, maybe I fell short of my expectations this time. And that's okay, because now I actually learned, right? So like, to me, what a failure is, you can only fail if you quit. That's the only way that you can fail.
Yeah.
Because if I don't meet an expectation, right, I could either change my perspective to say, oh, I learned something from this, and I get back up and I try it again. I try maybe a different way this time or whatever.
Yeah.
I can't fail unless I just straight up stop and quit. And I bury myself and I'm like, oh, I'm never going to do this again. I fail.
Yeah.
One thing I failed at was bartending school.
Okay.
I did bartending school. I spent like $600 to get this like certificate to be a bartender. This was back when I was living in LA and I was like trying to hustle to get money or whatever. But I failed at bartending, and I will say that because it's a lot of science that goes into it. You're a mixologist, so it's a lot of measurements, I should say.
Okay.
And you're mixing different chemicals or alcohols to make different flavors, and it was just a lot of things to memorize, not just the recipes, but also the names of all these different drinks. And like you switch one little ingredient, and now it's a completely different drink. So I didn't necessarily do my best at studying, and then when it came down to the test, and this is just the written test, this actually isn't even me performing yet. I completely failed and like bombed that entire test, and like my instructor came at me with that voice of like, you're a failure, like how did you even call this a test? You're never gonna make it in this field, and blah blah blah. If somebody's yelling at you because they messed up your drink or you messed up their drink, like you didn't even know what you were doing in the first place. And I'm like, I can't even argue with that with that because I actually don't know what I'm doing. I just like kind of winged this whole test, and it not only discouraged me, but then I also realized that I didn't even want to be in that field.
Okay.
You know, where it's that fast paced and I'm working with mixing all these drinks for people, and like I probably couldn't even handle people at Starbucks yelling at me for getting their coffee order wrong, so let alone like a drunk person coming at me. Like I was like, there's not even anything I want to fight for, honestly. I don't really want to be in that world anyway. Now that you're like speaking at me as an angry customer, I could do without that, you know. Like, I also at the time I wasn't in a mental place to receive that type of feedback where somebody's yelling at me because I messed up. I was like, I already do that on my own. Like, I don't need somebody else yelling at me, right? So that's one thing I failed at. But going back, failure is only perceived as failure if you don't keep going, if you don't learn from it and move forward. So I was kind of alluding to this in the last episode, but if you look at life as a movie, if you look at your life as a movie,
and we're back.
We're back to this idea, right? If you look at your life as a movie, right? And we get to a point where we want to just have everything perfected. And it's like, oh, I want to get to a point where I don't fail at all anymore. And I just want to be, and I figure it out. And I want to get to this point where everything is good. What would that mean in a movie, right? Where it's kind of going to this point, and like the sucky movies are the ones that you know what's going to happen in the end, and then it actually happens.
Yep.
Right?
Predictable.
It's predictable. We don't want that.
Yep.
So in life, why do we get so upset when we have these plot twists? Because a plot twist is what makes a movie great. Because you get to the end thinking that you knew what was going to happen, and then plot twist, it reverses everything, and your whole perspective of this entire movie is switched. So then you have to go back and watch the movie again. I was like, wow, I did not see that coming. But it makes it so much more interesting. So if we take that lens and look at our life like that, where, okay, now I have this plot twist where it wasn't what I expected, instead of it being like, oh, this is the end of the world, it's like, oh, this is actually kind of interesting, because now I have an opportunity to problem solve. I have an opportunity to overcome. I have an opportunity to grow.
Yeah.
So these failures aren't actually setbacks. They're actually projections to go forward.
Yep.
And, yeah, that was a little rant, but that's failure in a nutshell.
Yeah. The part of your story that stood out to me was the fact where you were talking about that you figured out that you didn't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a big part of what some people call failures is actually you just finding out that you don't want to do something so many times in life.
Yes.
And sometimes you can't figure that out until you try to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So in that aspect, it's not a failure. You're checking something else off the list.
True.
Like, okay, that's just not it.
Yeah.
So you can even relate that to stuff like relationships. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to get into a relationship to figure out that's not what I want.
I could talk about that for days. Yeah, that's for real.
Yeah. But I think that actually starts even from like a young age. Like when you go to school, they begin to teach us things on a scale of A to F. It's A, you did great. This assignment.
Like grades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get, you did great on this assignment. Like that's a success. F is like you failed.
Mm-hmm.
But if you actually like examine it, if you get an A on the paper, does that mean that you could not have done anything better? Was your cursive perfect? Like, even if you got the answers right, like, was there nothing you could have done better? Was there nothing you could have studied more? Not necessarily. And then on the other end of the spectrum, if you get an F, does that mean you accomplished nothing, or did you just not meet the expectation?
Right.
So from a very young age, we start to evaluate life on this level of failure and success with no middle ground in between.
Right.
And I think it's very important to teach everybody that in that middle ground is learning. So something might not necessarily be a success, and it's not necessarily a failure if you take something out of it, if you get something from it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. You know, like what we're taught as young kids, we carry on into our adult life.
Yeah.
Including our perspective on what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. We also have this false illusion of what is right as an adult and what is wrong. I wouldn't even say wrong, but like maybe not good enough.
Okay.
You know, so when it even comes down to like our career, right, or our finances, or what we want to be doing in life and how we should be using our purpose and our relationships or the material things that we possess, like we're always chasing. And I'm saying this as a the decades of our 20s, because we graduate high school and we feel like, okay, now you should know what you need, what you should be doing in life. You think you should be going from these training wheels to now you're like a super adult and have everything figured out. But like in reality, you're taking that whole decade to figure your life out. So that's the time where you need to be making mistakes and finding things that you don't like and trying a lot of new different things, because you're not going to get to the point of knowing what you want in life straight out of high school when your whole life is curated by your parents.
Yeah.
You know, so like you get out into the world, whether you go to college or you just go out into the world as an 18-year-old, wherever you are, you're on these adult training wheels. So that's when you're like teetering right or left, or like, how do I balance this right in the middle? And then you get off the training wheels and you're like, okay, how do I balance? I might fall off and scrape my knee, but I'm gonna get back up and get back on this bike, because it's better than staying stagnant and crying over my knee that's like already done healing. It's already closed up its wound. I'm still crying on the floor. No, I'm going to get back up on this bike and I'm actually going to learn how to ride. I'm going to know where I want to ride. I'm going to learn how fast I can drive or ride. And then I'm maybe upgrade my bike to something else. Maybe I got a motorcycle now. Like now I'm really riding, right? So like taking that whole time to figure out what it is that we like about ourselves, what we want in our life, and then also what doesn't work. And I think that's all tied to this ideal of failure, because you can't just get that with success. You have to fail to get success.
Yeah, so many of the people who are, you know, rich or just successful in their own minds, or like whatever the case is, like have any status, if you listen to their stories, there's failure somewhere in there. Like they went through something.
If not the whole way through.
Exactly. like if you listen to them, they didn't just wake up and everything was fine and dandy. But I like the fact that you pointed out the 20s particularly, in the fact that when you're younger than that, a lot of things are kind of decided by your parents. And I think a big part of that, and I'm curious to hear like how it was in your household, but one thing for parents is they don't want to see their children fail. It's like a natural thing within them. So they try to keep you away from a lot of failures.
Yeah.
So you hear them saying things like, you know, I've dealt with that before. I've been through that before. I'm trying to tell you what's going to happen to keep you away from the failure. And it's not until you move out of the house or kind of be on your own that you get to the point to where you have to go through those failures alone, and deal with them by yourself. So the fact that you brought up the 20s was a big thing. So how was it for you in your household? Were your parents the type of parents that tried to keep you away from a lot of failures, or did they kind of let you bump your head when needed?
So my parents were very protective, which as an adult now, I can appreciate it. Like back then I was like, why are you so protective? Like, I just want to do things. But as an adult on the other side, I'm like, okay, I see what you were trying to protect me from. So like growing up, my parents did such a great job raising us, because we're just gems. Just kidding. I'm kidding. That was an actual joke. But no, I think they did a great job. They did a great job. But anyways, growing up, my parents were very protective over what we were exposed to. So like my dad didn't grow up in like the greatest neighborhoods, and like, you know, he saw a bunch of stuff. So they were very particular to raising us in the suburbia. Putting us into good schools and putting us into extracurricular programs so that we weren't just out after school. Like we were busy doing our sport, right? So they were very particular, even with us watching movies. Like I couldn't watch even PG-13 until I was literally 13. I couldn't watch rated R until I was actually 18. So there was a lot of movies that I missed out that are like, you would say classics, but I wasn't exposed to them until I was maybe 18.
Okay.
And then even when I became 18, I wasn't like, oh, let me go watch that movie from like 6 years ago. I just never watched the movie, but I didn't realize how protective they were until I got to college, until I left the house. And not even the word protective. I would say they sheltered us a lot, which in a sense is a protection mechanism, right? But I didn't even realize certain things that were being withheld from my exposure until I got out into the world.
Yeah.
Like in my family, even in like our neighborhood, like we didn't really have a lot of divorce. So I didn't realize how big divorce was until I got out of high school. In my neighborhood, I was always surrounded by diversity. There was never, oh, she's a black girl. Like I went to a predominantly white studio for the most of my upbringing. And even after I got out of high school, I didn't realize racism was a thing in the country.
Wow.
At least I knew it was a thing, but I didn't realize how deep and big and like in our faces it was.
Yeah.
Because I never had those experiences growing up. I was never like, oh, she's a black girl, let me treat her differently. I never even had that thought in my brain because every single friend of mine was of a different nationality.
Okay.
It wasn't just black or white. It was like my best friend in 5th grade was like Asian. She was like Korean. And then I had another best friend who was Muslim. Like I had so many different varieties of people growing up that I didn't realize how much of a cultural shock it was. It was a very big cultural shock for me to come out of where I was raised.
Yeah.
Right. So then, yeah, even seeing some of my friends in college, they're talking about these hardships that they've had where maybe one of their parents was drugged out or they just got abused or sexually molested as kids. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
That happens? I thought that was only on the news and like on TV. Like that happened to you? Like I was very sheltered from these ideas, which in retrospect looking, my parents did a great job of, protecting us from that. But also on the same page, I was not exposed or aware or even conscious of these things. So then I felt like, have I been in a bubble this whole time?
Yeah.
And it's not even anything that I can blame, not even just on me or even on my parents, but it's just as a parent, you want to protect your kid from the world, right? So there are certain things that you're not going to tell them because you don't want them to know.
Yep.
Right. But then the older you get, you're like, it's not a matter of just withholding all this information. It's how can I teach you that this information is here and how you can like live with it, So yeah, growing up, there was a lot of security that I think even became an insecurity in me in those early 20s.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of things that I wasn't aware of that to anybody else is common knowledge. And I was like, what are you talking about? They're like, how do you not know this? I'm like, I grew up in suburbia. We don't have these problems. I don't even see crime on the streets.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I forgot what your question was.
No, I was asking you about like how it was in your house as far as your parents trying to keep you away from failures. A lot of similarities in my life.
Yeah.
I kind of had it. I had both ends of the spectrum in my own household. So,
okay.
When I was very young, we lived, when I say in the center of the hood, I mean in the literal center of the hood of our city. My father was a police officer. The police station was literally like a block away. The drugstore was literally across the street where all the drug dealers hung out. He was the police officer. And he was also the pastor at a local church that a lot of the people went through. So we were in the middle of the hood. Shortly after that, when I started to play football, we moved out to the suburbs because they wanted to just kind of get us out of that environment. And I started going to an academy, and I grew up the rest of the way in the suburbs, including when I moved here to Virginia. So, we just wasn't exposed to a lot of that. They didn't want us around it. So I can just remember times like we would come to church in the city, and a lot of the kids there will be talking about stuff, and me and my sister would be just kind of looking at them like, what's that? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? It's just because we weren't exposed. They didn't allow us to be around a lot of that stuff. And so in my own household, My mother she was always the protective one. Don't ride your bike outside of the window view. If I can't see you out the window, you can't go further on your bike. Mom was like, no playing Harry Potter video games. I don't know what spells they're saying in the video. Like,
Yes.
that was mom. You know what I mean? Mom didn't let me use I was using a butter knife until I don't even know how old I was. She was like, no real knives. Like,
I'll cut your steak.
Right. And Pops, on the other hand, because a lot of it was because of the way he grew up, he knew that I had to bump my head a lot of the times for me to learn things. So he was the more of the, go out there. I'll sit back here and watch you, but I'm going to kind of let you maneuver a bit. So I kind of had both ends of it in my own household.
Yeah.
But a lot of what you were saying resonated with me because after I started to get older and I began to get exposed to a lot of things, it was just almost like, has that existed this whole time?
Right.
And I didn't know.
Yeah.
Like, it was almost like an enlightenment period.
Yeah.
And if I'm just being totally honest, there was even a period where there was a little resentment between me and my parents because I'm like, why would you allow me not to even be aware of this and then be confronted with it in the world and not know what to do? So I kind of had to start like calling Pops and Mom a lot to just ask about stuff like, what do I do? Like, I've never seen this or experienced this before. Even with like the whole racism thing.
Yeah.
The first time I like really, really experienced it was one day in the store. I was walking, this is when I was working construction. So I was walking through Home Depot looking for some material, and I'm just literally walking, thinking about the material in my head. And some guy walks past me in the middle of the store, and he gets about 5 steps past me, and I hear him say, something to the effect like, watch the N-word, he's probably stealing.
Wow.
And he kept saying it. And it took like the second or third time for me to realize what he was saying. And I turned around and looked at him, and he was just looking at me. And I was like, it was just so foreign to me. I was like, what is that? Like, and it didn't really bother me. I just kept on walking. But I just had never really been exposed to that. Like, you know, I had a lot of my friends were white growing up, and I never saw color because I lived in the suburbs. I was out playing wiffle ball and basketball with my white friends every single day. It didn't mean that much to me. But yeah, just that, I think the aspect of the parents trying to keep the child from failures is a big, big part of how our minds are shaped going into adulthood. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, on the other side too, like being protected from failure, like, I don't know, like my vision in it is a little bit differently. Like, I don't, any self-talk that I developed that was hard on myself, like, oh, you're not good enough, that never came from my parents. I didn't develop that from watching my parents speak to me, speak to each other, speak to any of my siblings. I never adopted that from them. I think it came from an insecurity that I had as a middle child, because here I am, the baby girl for 11 years. I was the youngest granddaughter, and I was a little girl, and you know, it was just me and my brother for the first 11 years of my life. And then my sister come. Here she go. I was excited because I'm like, I get a real life-size baby doll, right? Like, here I get a little baby doll I can play with. But little did I know she was going to take my title. Now she's baby girl. And I'm like, what do you mean? That's who I am. Now she gets all my stuff.
Oh no.
And like, I remember going, okay. If anybody's a middle child, you realize that middle child syndrome is a real thing. And that's something I had to grow and learn how to get over. It took a lot. I made my own traumas, but there was a time where we were going through TSA, right? My brother had these beautiful long locks, like dreadlocks down to his butt. And he was always like getting all the girls, like he was like handsome or whatever. I don't know. They were saying he was handsome. I'm like, whatever, it's my brother. And then I have my little sister who's like the cutest thing, like little chunky, has the rolls and like has a little bow in her head, right? So we're walking through TSA. And the lady's like, oh my gosh, you're so handsome, to my brother. And then my sister walks by. She's like, oh my gosh, you're so cute. And then me in the middle of my awkward like middle school phase, didn't say nothing to me. I said, what about me?
She was like, are you a part of the family?
Right. Like, is this ugly duckling over here? So then that's when I really started to develop like a lot of hatred towards myself, because I wasn't getting the praise or the recognition that I used to have as the youngest one. You know, now that I'm awkward too, I had braces, glasses, and pigtails at the same time. And that was like a whole, I was going all the way through it through middle school. But my self-talk, I developed on my own through my own traumas that I made up in my mind. I was never less loved. I never had less attention.
Yeah.
I was never like all these things that I made up in my head that I didn't get seen. I didn't feel seen. So then I started to act out. I was still a pretty good kid. Like I never did anything crazy, but I developed my own self-hate talk.
Wow.
Which came down to you're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not all these things. You're never going to be good enough.
So did you see yourself in that time as a failure in respect to meeting those standards?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did a lot. Cause even like I started, both sides. So I started to see myself as like, oh, you're not good enough. And then I don't know what in me and my 13-year-old self was like, but I'm going to use that as my advantage. Cause like people would always be like, you're so weird. You're so weird. Yeah. And then like, you have those conversations in your mirror and you're like, well, if you say this, then what about that? Right.
Yeah,
like practicing these conversations.
2 hours later, you're late.
Right. And you're like, well, should have said that. But I trained myself to be like, thank you. Like if anybody says you're weird, I'd be like, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're taking that as a compliment now, And so like, even, if I would be like, okay, nobody's looking at you because you're a middle child. I'd be like, well, I'll make them look at me then. I'm going to be so unique. I'm going to dress different. I'm going to be so confident in my weirdness then. If you're going to call me weird, I'm going to be weird then, So that also helped my confidence. But, from like 13 to like even like your 20s, like you're just you're not actually confident.
Yeah.
At least in my experience.
You're trying to figure a lot of stuff
You're figuring a lot out. It's like a fake confidence.
Yeah.
It's a real fake confidence, but yeah.
And a lot of it is just truly being naive and the fact that you just don't know a lot of stuff.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not your fault.
You're not supposed to.
Exactly. You got to learn.
And I love that nowadays, like everybody's so big on like being consciously self-loving to yourself.
Yeah.
Especially towards a younger age, like even the younger kids, like you're practicing self-love.
Yes.
Like don't be mean to yourself.
Yeah.
I wish we had that growing up, but it builds a lot of character still. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How do you feel about participation trophies? Thank you.
If you lose, you lose. There's only one first place.
Thank you.
Maybe first runner up, maybe second runner up.
Yeah.
Third place max, but they should not be a 16th place.
Right.
You just thank for coming.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, it's okay to lose sometime. My goodness. We gotta print 17 trophies because everybody need one.
See, like back in my day, or competition, right? Your first place was like platinum. If you get a platinum, it's like, wow, platinum trophy. Then you have gold, which is like, okay. And then you have silver.
Yeah.
Silver is like, ooh, kind of suck, but yeah. They had bronze for a little bit. Bronze was really like, ooh, honorable mention.
You were there.
Yeah, we just have to mention your name for coming. But anything after that, you just get a little ribbon that they print out.
Wow.
It's nothing like crazy, you know? So like you want that platinum trophy. So you're working for that.
Yeah.
And so that's what built our blood, sweat, and tears, our discipline, our drive, our competitive edge. Like that's what builds that character.
Yep.
But nowadays, you get that same trophy just for showing up.
You're like, all they got to do is get there.
Yeah, and your technique it's all over the place. You look a mess, and there's like, great job, you get a platinum. It's like,
yeah.
No.
I think that's kind of the perfect segue into an aspect of failure that I wanted to talk about, and that was years and years and years ago when I used to just write stuff in my phone, thought I was a poet.
You still do that?
I do.
Your notes are crazy.
Yeah, they are. It's just I'm a lot better at it now than I was. But one of the things that I wrote that stuck in my head for all the years was a line that said, "You won't appreciate success until you can accept failure." And as I was kind of thinking through this topic, I was thinking about the fact that failure is actually what gives perspective to success.
Yeah.
So if you only had success, would it really mean anything to you? If you always had success, if nothing was ever hard or you never had any failures in your life? So it's actually those valleys that give you perspective to standing on the highest part of that stage. So like just a very simple analogy. Think about somebody who grew up on a high mountain. Say they had a little house on the tip of a mountain, and that's where they grew up. They were raised up there. They saw everything from that perspective. Would that seem high to them? No, they've been up there all the time. That's just normal to them. The perspective wouldn't change until they went down into the valley and they were looking back up at the success, and they're like, oh, okay, that's actually a high spot. So talk about the fact that you actually need those moments so that you can then appreciate the better moments.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think coming back to like how we were raised, I didn't realize that that was not normal back then.
Yeah.
Going back and like looking at my whole childhood growing up, where I didn't have traumas that a lot of people experience. My traumas were somebody's making fun of me because my glasses are thick. Why?
Which is valid.
I mean,
You shouldn't be getting bullied.
that is valid. I shouldn't be bullied, but that was my biggest issue. That was the only thing I'm crying about. Like this person making fun of me because I can't see. You know, like other than somebody getting like molested or like their parents, like somebody died or like just somebody got shot on the street or something. Like I didn't have those type of traumas, right? So then going out into the world and seeing that people are actually struggling, I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Let me suck my tears back up because it could have been so much worse.
Yes.
You know, like, and I'm blessed. I have a very blessed life.
Yep.
And I understand that.
Yep.
And it's not any type of way where I'm rubbing it in. Where like, oh, I never experienced that. Why are you going? You know, it's never that. It's wow. Well, one, thank you, mom and dad, for making our life so beautifully like blessed that we didn't have to like. You made a conscious decision to do everything in your effort through all of your sacrifices to give us this life.
Yep.
And I'm so grateful for that.
Yep.
You know, but I also have perspective for the people that didn't get those opportunities because now I'm like, wow, I am not like, you know, like I'm so blessed.
Yes.
I'm so blessed and I don't take that for granted.
Yeah. I think that reflection on how blessed you are is a huge tool. And it makes me think about a time in my life where it was kind of after I went through my surgery and stuff and I was in physical therapy. And I walked in one day and I was just at the lowest of the low. And I was just like, you know, nothing's changing. I don't feel like I'm going to get better. I don't feel like this is helping or working. And I was literally sitting in the lobby filling out the paperwork before I went back to my physical therapy. And out the back came a guy and he's walking and he's limping. And after seeing him for a couple of moments, I realized that he had a stroke in like most of the left side of his body wasn't working, but he was still walking on his own. And as he walked through the lobby, he literally spoke to every person he saw with a smile on his face. And he was like, how y'all doing today? Like, how are you? And he was talking to the nurses and I'll be back in a couple of days for my next appointment. And then I was just sitting there and I was like, look how blessed you are. Yeah. He's still blessed, even with the situation he's in. So you can't sit here and sulk about where you are and where you think you're not going to get to. Take a moment to realize how blessed you still are to even have breath in your body for another day. And I've used that since then. I've used that so many times, like when I'm feeling low or just feeling like I failed at something or something's not going right. I'm just like, remember how blessed you are. You're still here. You're still breathing, which means you still have a chance to get it right tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we talk about realizing that perspective? Because sometimes it's hard to get out of where we are in the holes that we either build ourselves or the holes that we feel like we have been put in. To get to the perspective of, oh, I'm not just in a terrible place, but I can see this place that I'm in right now as a blessing. Yeah. Can we talk about that perspective and how a shift might happen?
Scripture came to mind.
There.
Give me 15 seconds.
Yeah, you don't have to stay in a negative place. In fact, it's really just a shift of your mindset that will kind of guide you into the direction out of your hole. Because you don't have to stay in a hole. You just have to change your mindset and look upward.
I need 10 more seconds.
You might have to dig a little deeper, or maybe on the sides or whatever. Build little nooks in the hole so that you can start to step up. But you don't have to stay down there.
Here we go. This is Romans 5.
Mm.
I'm going to start at verse 2. It says, through whom we have gained access by faith into this grace in which we now stand. And we rejoice in the hope of the glory of God. Not only so, but we also rejoice in our sufferings, because
Yes.
we know that the suffering
Sufferings
produces perseverance,
perseverance,
character, and character,
hope.
boom. This
I
has
love
been a
that
Bible reading from Key and Cal.
I love that one.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that when you were asking that question. Getting to that place where even in your suffering, even in those moments where things are just not how you expected them to be, or you think that they should be, realizing that it's still a good place. Mike Todd actually did a sermon series one time called Here is Holy. And he was speaking to the fact that wherever you are now is a holy place. And there's so much to be learned and to gain from that spot. You don't have to get somewhere else to be blessed. You don't have to get somewhere else to learn something. You don't have to get somewhere else to reach a goal. Like where you are right now, it's okay to be there, no matter what it looks like. So when you find yourself in those places, just think of that scripture, even rejoice in your sufferings, because you know, ultimately God is still at work in your life. As long as you have breath in your body, he is still working in you and through you.
Yeah.
So just take a moment and breathe and look around and say like, okay, this is not how I want it to be or how I expect it to be, but how is God working in my life right now? Because I know that he is. So just begin to try to identify those things. And I do that so much in my life now, just constantly reminding myself of how many times I've been in one of those places. And when I get past him, I look back and realize what he was doing.
Yeah.
So in those moments, I now use that as like, okay, one day I'm going to be looking back at the situation and be like, oh, he was working and I didn't even realize it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so powerful to see your struggle as almost a part of your testimony.
Yeah.
So almost even like looking at yourself and your future self.
Yes.
Be like, oh, when I look back at this moment right here, I'm gonna be like, dang, I'm so glad this happened because, I'm so frustrated.
Yeah.
But those moments where it doesn't lead up to your expectations, where it could easily be seen as a failure, is actually just a redirect.
Yep.
And like there's so many plot twists in my life, but in those moments where I feel like it's the end of the world, I'm like, why did this happen? If this is what you wanted, why did you make this happen?
Yeah.
And usually what happens, what I hear is I've been trying. It is what God be saying.
Okay.
He's like, I was trying to get you to go this other direction, but you tried to stay in here and you wasn't budging. So I had to do something to get you out of there. So now that I got you out of there, I'm going to move you forward into this position. Even though you want to stay where you were, I'm not going to let you stay there because that's actually not good for you. Ooh. So I'm trying to get you to this new place. But if you keep looking back, you're not going to see what I'm trying to do for you right now. And I'm like, why are you yelling at me though?
Can you let that bar breathe for a second? Goodness gracious. No, I'm playing.
I'm like, why are you yelling at me? Like, cause like that's actually the revelation I was getting this past week.
Okay.
Because I'm looking back on a situation that I want to change, or I was wish like different outcomes would happen, and I'm trying to problem solve and troubleshoot of like, okay, if this changed, then this could happen, and then if that changed, then this could actually work out. And God is saying like, why do you keep looking backwards, girl?
Yeah.
Like, why do you keep looking at the thing that I delivered you from? Because I took you out of that. I saw things that you didn't see. I heard conversations that you didn't hear. And I took you out of that knowing what was going on because I have something better for you.
Yeah.
But as long as you're looking back at the thing that I took you out of, you're not going to see the new things that I'm bringing to you. You're not going to see the new opportunities, the new people that I'm bringing into your life, the new doors that I'm opening. You're not going to see that because your eyes are looking back there. So I need you to cut that out. Stop looking back there. It happened. You had your time to let it go. So let it go. And I need you to focus forward now, because until I can't necessarily give you this new thing quite yet until you're fully ready to receive it. And right now, by the way that you're looking back, you're not ready to receive it. So I'm going to hold this off until you're ready.
Yeah.
Till you come to terms.
Another scripture came to mind.
What is it?
You got to stop talking.
Okay.
Because the scriptures keep popping up every time you say something.
Yo, but no, it might be. I think I got it from. I did get it from a scripture.
Okay.
I don't remember which one it was. I think I was just reading it this week. That's why it came to me. Where it's like, don't look at the past, because do not dwell in the past. Forget the former ways, because can't you
talked
see?
about that.
Did I?
Yeah.
Because it said, do not forget, do not dwell in the past. Forget the former ways, because I am doing something new in you. And now that it pops up, why can't you see it? I'm bringing ways into your wilderness, and I'm creating streams in your desert.
Yeah.
So not only am I bringing solutions where you don't know what's happening next, but I'm also replenishing where you're lacking. I'm bringing fluid and bringing fruit to your where you were lacking, your deserts.
Yeah. Wow.
I don't remember
You were
what
talking about that because you were saying that you had spoke to God about it one night and the next morning it popped up on your Bible app.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was twice then, because
Okay.
that was then, and this was like last week.
Wow.
Again.
He just keeps hitting you with it.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah. So your story, your story was like so much of this. Like as you were saying it, I was hearing the scripture. This is in 1 Samuel 16, and this is when the Lord had rejected Saul as the king because the people wanted a king, so he gave them Saul to please them, and then he rejected him because Saul did some stuff he wasn't supposed to do. He was like, I got David now, basically. But Samuel was like stuck on Saul. Like he still wanted Saul. He was still stuck in that moment. And 1 Samuel 16 says, the Lord said to Samuel, how long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? And then it says, fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I have chosen one of his sons to be king. So he's literally asking him, like, how long are you going to be stuck on what I'm, releasing you from? And then I love the scripture because right after he asked that question, he tells him what to do. And he's like, be on your way. Like, there's something else that I have for you. Like, he's literally telling him, like, I got something better for you. If you would just start walking, I got something for you. And then he says, I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. And then it says, I have chosen one of his sons to be king. And I like that it says, I have been chosen, because what I'm hearing in the background is he's like, what you chose didn't work.
Right.
So now I've picked it up on my own.
Yeah.
And I have something for you. So I was hearing that as you were talking, that your story sounded so much like Samuel. Be on your way, Key.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I've come to, like, this past week, where that's why I was like, oh, okay, I'm trusting God. Because the moment that I was like, okay, I'm hanging this up, which part of like healing you think is also linear. You think healing is like, okay, after this long, like, it's going to be fine and dandy, but like, it's really like up and down. Like, you don't even know what emotions you'll be feeling sometimes. Yeah. So for me to say, yeah, I've moved past it, I've said it maybe like 6 times already, and like each time it gets further into me being like, okay, I moved past it. But there are certain days where it's like, you still dwell on it sometimes. Hate it. Why does that happen? We're human. Yeah. But yeah, I've accepted, and it comes to a point now where I'm like, okay, take a deep breath. God, now I want to explore what you have for me, because I actually understand and believe now that you have something better for me. Yeah. And I'd rather explore that than try to troubleshoot in my own way, in my own will, because that never works out. 1. But 2, I'm trusting in who you're shaping me to be as a person, the opportunities that you're bringing to me, and also like the life that you have for me, because we're not meant to just mourn all the time. Like, even in that scripture, he said, why are you still mourning? Like in the passage that Pastor had this morning, he said, the time for weeping and mourning is over now. So now go. It didn't say the time that you're feeling like the moment of you feeling mourning, or feeling like mourning and weeping, that's not gone away. It's just the time for you to do that is gone. Yeah. So now you keep moving forward. Even if you are still sad about it, keep moving forward.
Absolutely. Wow, that was a powerful point. Another thing I just thought about with that scripture that goes right along with that is God asked him, how long will you mourn for Saul? Yeah. Not why are you mourning for Saul? Right. He didn't negate the fact that it was okay for him to mourn. Yeah. He was just saying, like, how long are you going to stay there? Not that that you shouldn't be there ever. Right. So there is a place for mourning.
So that comes into mindset, going back to that redirect and how we can change our perspective. Yeah. So it's one thing to understand, like, okay, I failed at this, right? This did not work. this was a shortcoming in my expectations, right? There's a moment in time where you are allowed to grieve and like be like, oh, dang, that sucked. Like, let it suck. Let those emotions fuel you, because you need those emotions to move you forward. Because once you're in that, oh, this sucks phase, you get to a point where now you're fed up with it. And now that's when you really start to problem solve. Once you're in that fed up phase, right? That's when you're like, okay, how do I get up off my butt and do this? How are we going to make this work? Because it didn't work last time. So now I have a little more oomph in my tail for me to actually move through this and not take no for an answer. You know what I mean? So he's not saying don't feel those emotions. You can have them. It's just give yourself like a time, not even a time lot, but like, I'm not going to say like give yourself like a year or give yourself 6 months, or maybe you have to. Maybe you do give yourself a certain deadline. But after that deadline, it's not going to be, okay, now you're happy, you can go. So that's not the expectation. The expectation is, okay, I'm allowing myself this much time to feel. And then once that time is up, I'm going to be proactive about it. And I'm going to do something to change that outcome again.
Yeah. And that goes back to something we were talking about with Tim Ross. Stop looking at your mourning period as having a destination. It's never going to be an ending point to it.
Right.
Just progress.
Yeah.
Just progress.
Take steps forward.
Yeah. I want to get into another part of failure, the fear of failure.
Fear, yes.
And goals, because a lot of that has to do with goals. So the fear of failure, I think a lot of things are avoided, looked over, or not even tried because of the fear of failing. So they are never even attempted. There's a quote that I heard from Pastor Furtick, actually. I don't know if it was today.
Might have been.
I'll read it so you can tell me. I looked it up, and it's by a guy named Todd Henry. And the quote says, the most valuable land in the world is the graveyard. In the graveyard are buried all of the unwritten novels, never launched businesses, reconciled relationships, and all other things that people thought I'll get around to tomorrow. One day, their tomorrows ran. Yeah. And I was just thinking about that quote when he said it, and I was like, how many things are in the graveyard because people had that fear of failure? Just, they never started it because they thought they might fail. So they never even attempted it. Have you ever had anything in your life like that? That you never attempted just because you thought you might fail?
Sure have. Hold on. It was coming.
Uh-oh.
There was a thought there. Okay, there was an analogy actually.
Okay.
For this, so this relates on a smaller scale, but you can make it massive if you need to. Okay. So, you know when you have laundry and they're freshly dried and you're like, oh, I don't really feel like folding this, so then you put it on your bed, right? I like to put them on my bed because then I can't go to sleep until I fold them. Okay. But then some days, not even some days, there are some times where I'm like, I don't want to, like, I come home and I'm tired and I don't want to fold the clothes. So then I push them to the side and now I'm just cuddling with my clothes, right? Have you ever done that? You probably
I'll put them like in the basket. I won't cuddle with them.
Okay, well, I just like push them to the side. I'm like, I'm really tired, right? Yeah. But what you realize is it only takes like 10 minutes to fold your clothes. It takes a lot shorter and a lot less effort to actually get it done right then and there than to push it off and prolong it longer. Yeah. Because then you're just like, it's just a burden. It's just like, the clothes are there. I don't really want to fold them. I'll do them later. I'll get to it later. You know, it's an analogy. So this could be anything. But like you just fold it up or hold it off and then it's just like maybe goes weeks by or something. And then you're just like, I'll do it tomorrow. You keep pushing it off. But then when you actually do it, you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. You know, it wasn't, why was I pushing that off for so long? That really wasn't that tedious, right? So that's the same thing with our fear of failing, where you get afraid of, what is it, that somebody's going to make fun of you, that you're going to lose your money, or, you know, what, depending on what you invest, maybe don't invest your life into something, but what's the worst thing that could happen?
Which is a big question, I think, that you have to ask yourself in those moments. Yeah. Like, just go to the end. What's the worst thing that could happen here? And then make your decisions based off of that. Yeah.
Cause there's so many things, and like, I love bouncing ideas. I love, Like even with my dad, like he has a lot of ideas. I have a bunch of friends who have a lot of ideas, and I'm like, let's bounce them off, right? So then when even with myself, when it comes time to put certain things into practice, where it's like, okay, let's actually do something about it, then it becomes not even a fear of failing, but sometimes it becomes overwhelming of all the responsibility that comes with it. So it's not just a matter of like what would what's the worst thing that could happen. I could fail or I could learn or I could realize that this wasn't for me. Yeah, that's part of it. But also the risk and the investment and the responsibility that comes into it becomes overwhelming because now I don't have time.
Yeah.
I don't have time to waste all of this stuff into something that's not going to work out. So I think the fear is way bigger than me just failing.
Yeah.
It's all the things that come with it.
Yeah. Wow. That's so true. You get overwhelmed by that stuff.
Yeah.
And
Because I think the fear, sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
The fear isn't what if it fails? The fear is actually the fear of my life changing if it works.
Yep.
Because we say we want these things, but then that actually has to have change attached to it. And change is so uncomfortable. A lot of people run from it.
Yep.
And that's what they don't want. So they actually want to stay stagnant and complacent where they are because that's comfortable. It's safe. It's a safer option. Because if they try it and it works, and now say it's a clothing line or something and it pops off, now you're spending all your time shipping these packages off, and now you don't have time to be with your family because now you're working on your business, and that's what you're afraid of.
Yeah.
Not it failing, you're actually afraid of the time commitment that it's going to take for it to be successful.
And not even just the time commitment, but do I have within me what it takes to sustain it?
Do I have what's in me to sustain it? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, can I handle that?
Yeah.
Because once you start getting close to it, you have to start asking yourself those questions.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, maybe I shouldn't step off into that. Like, you start to question yourself.
And then it comes down to, this is just me running this. So that's another part where, yeah, it's overwhelming if it's just you.
Yep.
But not only do you have God with you, you also have a support system. Maybe they're not there to do the work with you. You know, like if I'm producing hoodies, maybe I can't expect all my family to drop what they're doing to make these hoodies with me.
Yeah.
But there are resources where I can hire people in my business.
Yep.
So now I have other people helping me. So my load is less.
Yep.
You know, so we don't necessarily always think about that because, again, we feel like we need to have it figured out. But you don't figure things out at the front when you're game planning everything. You figure everything out as you're going through it.
Yes.
So you have to go through it to learn that you're actually capable of way more than you think.
Yep. Yep. I'm hearing that scripture that says his strength is made perfect in your weakness. And I think we oftentimes focus more on our weakness and forget about his strength. Yeah. So in those moments, we have to remember that although we may be feeling weak or falling short in some areas, that his strength is made perfect in our weakness. I want to talk about this idea in relation to goals. So when it comes to the fear of failure, in relationship to goals, because I think in a lot of ways, what we're talking about, what you can begin to do with your goals is to almost dumb them down because of that fear of failure. So you start trying to make them into something you feel like you can accomplish instead of leaving it as is. Now, what I will say is there is a place for taking goals and making them more manageable so that you can reach bigger goals. You can actually do that. I think you talked about this before with, what is it called? Self-efficacy?
Yes.
Yeah, you talked about that before, which I think there's totally a place for that. But I think also on the other side, there are a lot of times when people take their goals and they seem so big, or the vision that God has given them seems like so much, and they feel like if they attempt it, they might fail or they don't have what it takes. So they start trying to shrink it down to something they think they can handle. And then they go to God with this quote unquote goal. And I think a lot of times God looks back at us and he's like, you don't really need me for that.
Yeah.
You want a new car, go get one. I don't really have to do that for you. You got some money. Like,
Right.
I don't have to do some miraculous thing in your life for that to happen. And I think it's okay for us to leave our goals at a spot that leaves room for God to operate.
Absolutely.
Because if your goal's big enough, then God can look at it and say, oh, you can't do that by yourself. You need me. So now he has the opportunity to display his glory in your situation. So kind of the analogy that I was thinking about was think about this big, juicy hamburger, right? You got your bread, bunch of carbs, you got your bacon on it, you got fully loaded, you got cheese, whatever you want, barbecue sauce, like whatever you put on this burger, it's huge. But then you look at it and it seems like too much for you to handle.
Yeah.
So what do you begin to do? You begin to take things off of it. And that's how we do with our goals. We look at it and we say, the bread's too many carbs. Let me take the bread off. The barbecue sauce, too much sugar. Let me take that off. And before you know it, you look at your plate and there's nothing but lettuce and tomato on your plate.
Salad.
And you're looking at a salad.
SpongeBob.
Yeah.
Salad.
And the thing is, now you're looking at something it's not the goal that you were going after in the beginning, which then is going to make it easier for you to fall off later because you're chasing like an eroded version of your goal.
Yeah.
So you're going towards something that you never, ever really wanted.
Yeah.
So all that stems from the fear of failure, and we don't want to be chasing those small versions of our goals. Leave your goal as is and just let God operate. Leave the what you can't do, he can do. So leave that space open for him. Don't be out here eating salads.
Salad.
Eat your burger.
Here's a practical.
Yep.
So taking the aspect of affirmations, you know, affirmations, right?
Yep.
Saying positive statements so that your mind, your body, and your life will adjust to those statements.
Yes.
Right? The opposite is negative talk. If you attract negative, you will be negative. If you present positive, you will attract positive, right? So in that sense, if we make our faith so big, then our life will attract that big faith, right? So if I have this ridiculous dream, right, where say I want to own a like 45,000 square feet creative facility that has a gym, that has dance in it, that has production, all these things, all these aspects, and it's also a community for people to gather and stuff like that. Like that sounds like a crazy dream.
Yeah.
I can't do that by myself.
Yep.
Like even if we could probably do it with the 6 of us here, but still that's a giant dream for us to curate this huge thing, right?
Yep.
So I have to believe so strongly that that is mine. Every single day I need to practice my belief that that is what my goal is. That's what I want. And that's not just what I want because I want it. That's because God has put this dream in my life since I was like 15 years old.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's not a reason that you have this dream just because. If it's a reoccurring vision that you have, a goal, then God put that there.
Yes.
Because he's trying to get you to level up to that position so that he can do some more things within that resource.
Yep.
Right? So I need to practice that belief every single day that not only do I believe that this is going to happen, but then I start to make different connections and start to network differently so that I start to attract to that.
Yes.
So one thing to practice my faith, praying on it every single day, right? But then also going into my day of like, okay, what are 3 practical things that I can do today that can lead me towards that?
Yeah.
So maybe I'm gonna go out to a coffee shop and talk to somebody about what is missing from their community, what they think is missing. I might go to a person and say, what, as a gym trainer, what do you think is missing from your gym? Or let me go and talk to this person because they have a facility and they're thriving and maybe I can seek mentorship from them. And so I'm practically doing what I need to do while also having this giant faith, believing that God is going to bring me to this promise that he's brought. Not even just a material thing, because that's a material thing, but also say maybe in my healing journey where it's like, I am going to be so healed from this trauma that I had experienced in my childhood. And I just want to grow past it, that it doesn't haunt me every single day. God can deliver you into that as well.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
just believing it, because that, who was that who stepped out onto the water and Jesus was like, come. Peter. And then he looked back for a second and then he started to sink because the moment he took his eyes off of Jesus, the moments that he started to doubt where he was and be like, oh, but how am I floating? That's when he started to sink.
Yeah.
So even if it sounds crazy that you can walk on water, believe it.
Yep.
Believe it.
Yep. Wow. Another practical. I think when it comes to the fear of failure, another practical that you can have is, instead of fearing failure, just learn to manage risk. I'm reading a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad at the moment, and he talks about managing risk. And a lot of that is kind of something we talked about. Ask yourself, what's the worst case scenario? What are the things that could happen as a result of this failing? And that just gives you a good basis to make decisions off of. Like, okay, if I did this and that happened, how would I have to react? What things would I have to do to get myself back on track? So I think that's a very good practical, especially when you're dealing with big stuff like we're talking about.
Yeah.
With those big goals, like just ask yourself, okay, if I step off into this and I invest in this, or I put my time into this and it doesn't work out, or it doesn't go how I expect it to, what's going to happen? What is it actually going to look like in my life? And then what would I have to do to get myself back on track?
Yeah.
And I think what you'll find a lot of times is it's not as scary as it seems when you begin to break it down. You're like, oh, well, if that did happen, then I could do this. I could move that around. It wouldn't be comfortable, but I could get myself back to a good place. So when you break it down like that, and don't just stand back and look at the mountain, actually go up and see how heavy the mountain is before you start making assumptions about it. I think that's a good practical tool.
Absolutely.
For people to use.
Absolutely. You start to ask the hard questions, because that's when you start to problem solve.
Yeah.
You know, when you answer those questions, or maybe you can't answer them yet, but the fact that they're in your psyche for later, then you can come back and be like, oh, I actually found the answer to that.
Yep.
This is like 6 months later, but I actually have the answer to that question I had 10 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's really big. I want to talk about, before we wrap up, let's actually hone in on the power of failure, because it's so powerful to have that failure, that redirection. Why? What is the power of failure?
The power of failure is, it's literally like a fuel. What I'm thinking about is like the fuel in a rocket ship. It's literally what propels you to the high place is the failure.
Yeah.
It's literally the lessons you learn. It's literally sometimes like how you get angry about the failure and it makes you work harder. It develops your ambition. It is literally the fuel that propels the rocket to where it's supposed to be. Failures are literally sometimes like obstacles in our lives that God uses to redirect us in certain paths. Like, nope, can't go that way, so I have to go that way. It's because God's trying to get you somewhere. So the things we're looking at as failures are actually just almost like a roadmap or signs on a road that are pointing you in the right direction, and you're learning along the way and you're gathering tools along the way. So the true power of failure is the power to get you to where you actually need to be, which is where God wants you ultimately.
I like that.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of an analogy. I couldn't find one that accurately signifies failure. But I almost think of failure as like collecting valuable like baseball cards or something. Because as valuable as these individual cards are, that's what makes your collection. That's what makes it more fine, right? You have one card and it's like, oh, cool. What am I going to do with this? But if you sell somebody a giant binder of all these cards, then that's impressive. You know, so like if that's what our failures are, that's all the mishaps that we've had, the redirections, the plot twists, all the solutions that we've found from trial and error. That's what makes up our success. You can't have a successful card collection with just one card or two cards or one page. Like you need a bunch of trial and error, right? So to change the perspective of failure, it's like, I even saw this somewhere. It's probably motivational talk, but it's like, if you knew that you had 55 failures or rejections or no's until you reached your success, like it's finite, but reached your goal, I should say, wouldn't that make it so exciting for you to go and get those no's? Like if you're like, oh, I'm at the 10th no now. I'm only like, whatever math is.
You'd be standing in front of people. Thank you so much.
Right. I'm only 45 away from my success right now. Like I need to keep going and collecting these trials and these errors and figuring things out and problem solving, because I'm getting so much closer to where I'm trying to get to. You know, so if we see failure as not just, oh, this sucks, why did this happen? It's like, no, okay, that was an opportunity for me to learn from. What about this didn't work? So we can take from that, learn from that, and actually put something else together to make a different plan. You know? Yeah.
Like ingredients.
All
your failures are ingredients to the best meal you've ever cooked. This segment of our podcast is called Questions from the Audience. We have our producers in the audience, and they are going to present us with some questions, and then
From our social media audience.
yeah, what we got today.
All right. So the first question comes from it's princess underscore Tim. And she wants to know what are some tools to shift your mindset when you feel you have failed in life?
Tips?
Tips, tools.
Tips.
To shift your mindset when you think you have failed in life. Mm.
I would say, okay, so everybody has their hype man, right? You have those besties that's like, you're killing it, you're doing so good. Get around those people for a minute and let them hype you up. Let them gas you up because they are the people that know you to your core and they can bring you back up to be like, actually, girl, you're actually killing it right now. You may not feel like you're getting anywhere, but I saw you like a year ago and you was grinding and look how far you are now. Like you have this much more progress than you did last year. So get around those people. One, it's one thing to hear somebody else say it, but then it's another thing for you to believe it yourself. Because you could go to those people and hear it and it just sounds like words, and then you go home and you still feel like a failure. So one thing that I like to do, which is sounds really ridiculous when you're doing it at first, but once you do it after a while, you start to get more comfortable with it. But speaking to yourself in the mirror, speaking to yourself, making eye contact as if you're talking to your younger version, and like let that be your window to your soul of like you speaking to your younger self, and coach yourself like just how you would coach your 5-year-old version or like an actual 5-year-old if they lose. I think I talked about this too before, but like coach them. I'm like, okay, listen, this is not the end of the world. We didn't quite make that goal. We didn't make that basket. So this is what we're gonna do. This is our next play. This is how we're gonna move around and blah blah blah. And even if that doesn't work, we got 5 other plays that we have ready to go. So don't be afraid if that doesn't work out. So like learning how to coach yourself in the mirror, making eye contact with yourself, until you believe it. Because at first you're not gonna believe it. You're just gonna be like, good job. Like even if you say that, believe it. It's a good job, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So baby steps.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off that. When you're having that conversation with yourself, I'm just going to give you a couple of things you can ask yourself. Number one, ask yourself, what was the expectation that didn't get met?
Ooh.
And I bet you in that conversation, you're going to realize that you were actually a lot closer to meeting that expectation than you think you were. The other thing you can ask yourself is, if I found myself in this situation again, would I make the same mistake? The answer is probably no, which means that you did actually learn something from that situation. So it's really not a failure. So those are just 2 things you can ask yourself when talking to yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. So our second question comes from Monsieur Moise, and he wants to know, how can I welcome failure?
Like the scripture in Romans 5 says, rejoice in your sufferings. When you find yourself in those quote unquote failures, remind yourself that you're just getting closer to what God has for you. So it's just another step in the journey, and it's another thing you checked off the list.
It's like a reframe, right? So anytime you have something that you feel like, oh, I failed, like instead of telling yourself, oh, you suck, be like, wow, good job. You know, like even with my kids, all right, so if we're trying a new trick in class and dance, right, and they fall, I say anytime somebody falls to the floor, the entire class will applaud and clap because that means they tried so hard that they fell on their butt. And that's a great thing that they risked everything to fall on their butt. So like now with failure, to have that same idea where it's like, okay, I fell on my butt. Yes. Good job, self. Let's go. Let's go try it again. Let's try again. You know, so just that reframe, I think, is helpful to invite failure.
And our last question comes from Mosca13. And they want to know, what impact do you think failure has on one's mental health?
I think that is determined by how that individual sees failure.
Yeah.
Because if they see it like kind of like the way we were just describing, you can actually have a positive impact on your mental health, because you're like, man, I'm getting so much closer to where I want to be through these quote unquote failures. I think on the other end, if you have an expectation that's unmet and you allow that to kind of penetrate your being, then it's going to make you feel like less than. It's going to make you feel like you're not good enough, that you can accomplish things. That's going to have a negative effect on your mental health. So I think it can go both ways. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it could, yeah, like, it really just depends on your perspective. But I just encourage, no matter what you're going through, realize that it doesn't have to be a lonely experience. You don't have to go through failure alone.
Yeah.
Whether you find somebody like your best friend or an accountability partner or a life coach, or just getting closer to God and understanding that he is there with you and actually knows the route that you're supposed to be on. Not even supposed to be on, but the route that you're currently moving through. It doesn't have to feel like it's a lonely perspective, like journey. You know what I mean? So it really just comes down to perspective at the end of the day. Is that the last one?
That was all.
Work.
Boom. SOS.
Yeah, so this segment of our show is called SOS, which is subject on the spot, where we throw a random subject at each other and do a 1-minute sermon on it. So,
I got to come up with a subject for you.
yeah, I go first this time.
Let's see here. I got to give you something good. I don't want to just throw something out there.
Challenge accepted either way.
All right. Nature girl. Bark on a tree.
Bark on a tree.
Yeah.
Bark on a tree, bark on a tree, bark on a tree, bark, 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 bark. Okay, here we go.
Did you start barking?
Yeah. All right, so bark on a tree. The title of this one is called Bark on a Tree. So you be going on a walk sometimes and you see those trees, right? It depends on the season of the year and like the humidity in the air sometimes, but sometimes the skin of the tree will start to peel. And that is not always a bad thing. Sometimes as a kid, you would go and try to like help it out and peel it out. But that's a natural thing in nature where it's replenishing and preparing itself for the next season. So sometimes in life, we need to see that bark on the tree as the same thing as our failures, where it's just a layer that needs to peel off for us to shed so that we can produce for the next season. Because there are certain things that we need to let go of that's not really healthy for our growth, and we just need to get comfortable with peeling it off. It may hurt we don't know if it hurts the tree to like shed a layer of skin, but sometimes even when you're shedding in the summer, like you're shedding that skin, it doesn't necessarily hurt, but it needs to come off so that your new skin can regenerate and produce more fruitful fruit.
Boom. I like how you took the bark to the skin. That was nice.
Okay.
That was nice.
Okay. Let's see. Crayola crayons
Crayolas.
with the sharpener on the back. 64 pack.
Ooh.
Those ones.
64 pack of Crayola crayons. Boom. Failures are like crayons in a box. They come in all shapes, in all sizes, in all colors. And you can take those crayons and you can actually create masterpieces. Now, individually, those crayons have their own color. Some of them have smells to them. And we can look at those individual crayons and put them in a box and say, this one's only orange. It doesn't offer me anything else. But it's when you take all of those failures, those colors, and mix them together that you begin to get new colors. And then you can put them down on the paper and you can begin to draw a picture that doesn't look like any one individual color, but together they look like a masterpiece. So when you're experiencing those failures in your life, just look at it like another crayon in the box, another tool that you can use when you go to that blank canvas of your life and begin to draw a picture. You can turn that picture into whatever you want it to be. And the more colors you have, the more elaborate your life.
Wow. Beautiful. Come on.
Season 2, episode 8. Down.
8.
Wow.
We love y'all. Thanks y'all
For real.
for rocking with us. I hope this episode blessed y'all because it blessed me.
It did me too.
It was good to talk
I
about.
don't know why
it.
I start talking like that. Me too got blessed.
Blessed.
Yeah.
God, yes. We love y'all. You guys, if you like our content, please let us know by liking and subscribing. Also, please leave us some comments in the comment section.
Yeah, go subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, Apple Podcasts, Instagram, and YouTube, which I said already.
Yes, all
But
those
still
things.
do it.
Still do that.
Yep.
And also, if you'd like to activate your faith a little bit stronger, we got a community group for y'all on Facebook. And in that Facebook group, this is what we'll be doing.
Yeah, it's going to be all of our crew members. You're going to hear devotionals, worship songs. You're going to hear testimonies. Go in there and connect with the community.
Yes, most importantly, we got community, so you never feel like you're alone. That's it. We love you guys. We'll see you next episode.
Peace.